Good to meet you.
Yes, you too. We're so happy to have you on with us
Um,
today because there's so much to talk about here. Because you've had several great projects that have been going on, and then also a wonderful, wonderful EP that we need to talk about. So first of all, this got to be sort of um, I guess, a big blessing or embarrassment of riches, right? When you have this many good things at once, right?
yeah, that's what I love about working in film is you never know what's going to happen, and things tend to just sort of like all collide and happen at once. And sometimes it's sometimes just the chaos of that is the best part of it. You can't control it.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, so a couple of the shows I know that people have really been gravitating towards, and are up for awards discussion right now. That those, gosh, those have to have been so much fun to work on, and I'm not sure in what form that you get these things because sometimes you'll get a full show, sometimes you'll get just a script, sometimes you'll get just a
Sure.
description, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, yeah, across these different projects, it went everywhere from having a script with Knox Goes Away and talking to Michael
Mhm.
Keaton in like very abstract form without seeing the film, first of all. And I'm just actually pinging voice messages back between me and Michael with me playing something on the piano, even him playing something on the piano, and to really abstract to something like the regime, where there's already a pretty well
Mhm.
defined rough cut,
Yeah.
albeit not finished, but you can really see what you're working on. And there's no way of saying one is better than the other. It can be really hard to work on something that's just at a script stage.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it's very freeing because you're not locked into anything yet. So it engenders a lot of experimentation. Usually means you've got more time, but honestly, sometimes having less time as well is a good thing. There are projects I've done where you just have to just go with your instinct really, really fast. So I always say there's no hard and fast rule about any of this. So it really is just like you just have to react in the moment, and that's me, I suppose. I'm a very much like react in the moment type of person.
Yeah. And such wildly different projects too. I guess you have to go into a different headspace depending on what it is that you're working on, and sometimes you might be working on a couple of these things at once, right?
Right, they are different, and I think the interesting thing is you just have to, as a composer, you have to make sense of all of this through your own filter,
Hmm.
and it's not like they're all going to sound the same, but your perspective, your take on things is still there, and that's the constant. So even though the projects are very different and they require different treatments and different types of music, it's still me. And that's it's something that young writers ask me a lot about. Is I actually gave a talk recently to a group of students about finding your voice and what's the voice that you bring to something. And I was
Hmm.
saying to them exactly this. It's yes, as a film composer, you need to be very broad and be able to cover lots of bases. There's no question that's part of your job, but also I like to bring exactly what the director is asking me for, but also something else that they weren't expecting, something that's like just a surprise or an added extra of my take, how I see things. And as a composer, that's what I'm always looking for, is how can I give exactly what it needs, but then something other as well.
Yeah, we usually like to ask the advice of people who do this and do this so well, but I mean, I guess it can vary per project, right? Or at least,
Yeah.
but getting in the door is probably the thing that people want to know the most about, right?
Right, but that's, honestly, I mean, that is just the randomness of being in the right place at the right time a lot of the time. Yeah, and you're right. A lot of people think there's some magic trick to that, or there's something I'm not telling them. I once did a panel talk, and someone put their hand up in the audience and said, I know there's something you're not telling us about how to actually get, do that, get your foot in the door. I said, no, honestly, this is just like, it's luck, it's perseverance, it's graft, and it's being good, and it's being taking the opportunities when they come and really running with them and trying to do something. But everyone starts sort of from zero. I didn't know anyone in film or television or music, when I was starting. Most people start from that point. uh, and it is so random. It's really fascinating hearing different people's paths, down this career. But as you say, once you've got your foot in the door and you're actually on a job, then what you do with it is to a certain extent more in your control, although there's an element of being out of your control as well, because film is highly, highly collaborative. And again, this goes back to the idea of, well, whatever you do and how much you might have to collaborate, and you might have to rework stuff or redo stuff, you need to believe it in yourself. You need to have the filter of your own taste and your own perspective, because if you're asked to change something or do something differently, that I always think, fine, I'm up for that. But it's never going to work if you do something that you don't believe in. It's sort of got to come from inside you, and you've got to find a way of hearing what someone's asking you, and find a way of doing that creatively that you think you can really believe it. Because I don't think you can sell a creative idea to someone as a concept if you don't believe it yourself. And that's what I try and tell kids as well. It's, yeah, you need to learn to do different genres, but just copying that genre or that genre is only going to get you so far. But what you need to do is absorb that, synthesize that into who you are as a person, and then say, yeah, I can do that, but I'm going to do it in this way or that way. And that's sort of what makes you interesting as a person, I think, anyway.
Yeah, well said. Related to that, you like this. My co-host Drew Pearson is one of our great Dallas Cowboys in American football. Of course, caught the Hail Mary. We all know the Hail Mary term. We just kind of have to
Yeah.
go for it. And so we love to ask the Hail Mary moment, the moment in your life or career where you just had to go for it and it worked out for you. What do you suppose that was for you?
That's a good one. I mean, I think sometimes, honestly, the Hail Marys in this business, you only see with a lot of hindsight. You don't
Mhm.
necessarily know them at the time. A big one for me was, when I was really young, I was looking around for some career advice, and I made some calls, and I was sort of a bit bashful, but I went and had a coffee with a composer who I've had been introduced to. And he asked me, he said, I was really young, I was literally just in my early 20s. And he said, oh, look, I'm working on this movie. He showed me a scene. He said, why don't I give you a scene? Why don't, for fun, why you just go home, take it home, and write a scene and bring it back, and let's look at it together the next day. And so I sort of thought, okay, I didn't know there was any strings attached. It was a very just like, oh, let's do it for fun. So I did that, and I stayed up all night, and I did something that was a little, I really went for it. And I showed it to him, and he hired me on the spot, and I worked with him as his assistant for 4 years after that, every single day. And that's how I got to know, you know, everyone in the movie business in the UK when I started. And
Mm.
but you don't, and I knew that was exciting and great even at the time. But now when I look back on it and all of the people that I met and the scenarios, and then more work came from that, you only realize with a lot of hindsight that that probably was quite a good Hail Mary. If I just sort of said, if I just dash something off, or if I sort of say, yeah, I don't, I'm not going to, maybe I won't do it or something. So you don't really know till a long time afterwards that you might have scored a good goal. It's one of those life lessons that you need to have a little bit of time behind you to be able to look back and go, okay, that was an opportunity well taken. Good
Absolutely. Oh,
question.
that's a good one. Huh, thank you. Yes, and of course, part of that is, as creative types, we're often hard on ourselves and, get in
Sure.
our head about things. And is there something that you keep in mind that keeps you on the right path even when things are tough, or maybe that right note or that right piece is not coming?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. We are our worst critics, and I think it's
Yeah.
it's an important part of being creative is that you learn to manage yourself as well as other people, and not get blocked by it. And that's I've actually found occasionally writing music away from picture, doing albums occasionally away from picture, help with that, because it really forces you to confront yourself and confront all of the opportunities to do anything. Because when you're doing a movie, there are constraints on you, which I actually really I enjoy. I find that very creative. But when you're saying I'm going to do a record now, that's sort of like, it's a bit scary because there's no one
Hmm.
to constrain you, and then you're faced with your own, self-criticism and all that. And learning to manage that is actually very important, I think, as a creative person. I mean, not to get too Rick Rubin on you, but I think this is very, this is they're very much life lessons. They're not just like music lessons. These are lessons in how to sort of manage your own, not manage your expectations. I think it's good to have high expectations, but manage your own self-critique. And I really, Rick Rubin is wonderful at talking about this. I really like Stephen King's book on writing. Actually, Stephen
Yes,
King, and he says something
it's
really
incredible.
great, which is, you just write the first draft, and don't get into the weeds of like editing and worrying about it. Just put something down and then go back and look at it and see what you've got and work on it. And that's, I found that to actually be, it sounds very simple, but it's sort of like a deceptively subtle thing to do. But I've
Mhm.
found that to be very productive. Sometimes it's not like I get writer's block. I don't, I'm a movie composer most of the time, so I don't have the chance of having writer's block. Movie composers just
Mhm.
don't get that, because we're under huge time pressures, and so we are used to writing every day, which is a bit like a muscle that you sort of, like an athlete, you have to stretch. But if you're doing a project or even on a movie where you're searching for what you think is the right thing, just writing and doing a lot of stuff and then going back and looking at it is a great way of just getting started on an idea,
Mhm.
not getting hung up too much on whether every last part. And sometimes there are times when you agonize over every single note at the beginning, and every composer will tell you they go through that that process.
Yeah.
But sometimes just getting a load of ideas down first and then going back. And my theory is that really good composers and people who really take things to a next level are very good at spotting stuff within what they do that they can then grab and take to the next level. I think a really
Mhm.
great example of that is, I just rewatched the Beatles film again, and that amazing moment when Paul McCartney's just jamming on the, on the guitar, and all of a sudden there's sort of chaos going. People are talking, Ringo's playing the drums, and all of a sudden someone hears something and they go, ah, and then they've got a song, and it's like, it's Let It Be, or whatever it is, and it's interesting. But I think, you know, people who are really inspired just know when to grab hold of something that just catches their ear and run with it. So my theory is that a lot of people come up with good stuff, but it sometimes falls through the net. It slips through the net. This
Mhm.
is my theory. So keep on. My advice is keep on writing. Try and write all the time, and then go through it, and then be quite self. Then you can be quite self-critical with yourself and say, okay, well, that's okay, but but that little bit there, oh, there's something to that. And then that's where being really self-critical is really useful, because you've already got something to work with, and it doesn't matter if you're discarding three-quarters of it. But if you're just writing and constantly discarding everything before you've had a chance to get lots of stuff down, you can be really, really hard on yourself. Anyway, that's my Rick Rubin moment for the day. I need to cut
Yeah.
a long beard.
No, no, I'm glad we got that. It's very, very good. Another thing I wanted to make sure that we talked about is that great EP that came out. Of course, we lost our great maestro this last year, which is devastatingly sad. I sat next to him at our Critics' Choice Documentary Awards, or at least at the next table over, and such a gentleman. And you got to work so closely with him, and I just got to know a little bit about that experience, because it's well, what a great moment in time for you, right?
Yeah, Ryuichi, he was genuinely. sort of an enigma,
Hmm.
and a very nice person at the same time. It was, that's very much him. Hard to say that I knew that I got under his skin that much, but I feel like we had a real connection when we did this project, and we spent some wonderful time together, and he was very generous. The project started when I did a record called Face to Face, which was a long time ago. And the reason I made that record, and it was re-released 2 years ago, so you can hear Face to Face on all platforms. The reason I made that original record was that people ask me questions like, how do you get inspired? Where does inspiration come from? Which is broadly what we're talking about here. And in the end, I thought, well, I'm just going to make a record that's totally improvised, and then I'm going to go and meet someone who I feel inspires me. We're going to go to an interesting place, and we'll just do something on the day and have to commit to it. And it'll be an interesting way of sort of saying, well, that was what happened on that day, and that was like that spark of inspiration. And so I ended up going to Africa and working with an artist, Kawesa, that I'd met on Last King of Scotland, out in Uganda, and I worked with Regina Spektor in New York on some songs, and all sorts of amazing experiences. It was truly incredible. One of one of the great experiences was meeting Ryuichi, and he was interested in improvising, doing a two piano thing. So I went to New York, and he had a studio that he really liked, and he had a piano that he really loved. And I get that because I'm a pianist, and you're very,
Hmm.
when there's an instrument that you really connect to, I get that you sort of feel like you get something out of it that is your own thing. So we spent a long time. We set up like this dueling pianos thing with two grand pianos in the room. And I remember when I turned up, he said, "So, what are we going to play? Where's the material?" And I laughed. I sort of said to Ryuichi, I said this is going to be, we're really going to improvise. And he just laughed at me. He's like, "You're crazy, man." He said, you really want to do that?" So I said, "Yeah, no, totally." I was really trying to embrace the spirit of let's go into this with a totally clean slate and see what happens. And so we recorded a lot of material, and it was amazing experience. And we released two tracks on the original record, Face to Face, because I had two tracks per artist. And then when Ricci died last year, was it just the I think it's just come
Hmm.
up for
Yeah.
the 12-month period. I I was really obviously it was really shocking, and I knew he was really ill. I knew that, but it's when it happens, it's always a shock. And not at first, but after a couple of weeks, I just went back through that archive, which I hadn't listened to for many years, and I pulled up some of the multi-tracks, and I was really shocked to find a lot of music there that had not made it onto the original record. And I'd listened to it at the time and combed through, but with a little bit like hindsight we're talking about now, and and that sort of Hail Mary thing. I actually was really shocked with um, how powerful I powerfully I reacted to hearing some of that material. And I thought, gosh, I think this needs to be released, and it would be a wonderful tribute to Ricci to do that. And the original record was what I wanted to do. What I'd done is I had captured the sound of the place, and the tracks I'd done with Ricci, I had actually then reprocessed and resampled it, and I'd looped it and made it into something quite produced. But as I was listening to the raw multi-tracks on what became Crystalline, the record we're talking about now, I
Hmm.
thought, well, yeah, just to capture the absolute like up close like feel of really being there, because I can remember physically being there. Obviously, the listener wasn't there. I thought I don't really want to process this. I want it to be really like close and like up front and personal. And I didn't want to put any reverb. I didn't want to put any other sounds. It's just the two pianos, and I had Richie's panned sort of to the right, I'm panned to the left, so that it feels like you're sitting just like 4 feet from the pianos. So it's a different approach to how I'd done the original
Hmm.
music, and in a way, I felt like it really took me when I heard it like that, really dry and close. It suddenly it was like, jam! It took me straight back to that feeling of being there, and it was sort of very touching moment. So I felt like it was important to release it, and I'm glad that people have connected with it and feel like it's something valued that they've enjoyed. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very, very special. Well, speaking of which, and to wrap it up, I know that you're always working on something really wonderful. What do you have coming up that we can look forward to?
Yes, so I am working on another record at the moment, but that's a long way off. So and you never quite know where those are going to go. But that's always interesting from keeping your film chops, alive. And but there's a horror project coming up in shortly, which I'm not going to say too much about, except it's going to be quite exciting. And I quite like doing horror films. I haven't done that many of them recently, anyway. But it from a musical point of view, it does let you really let loose and do something really a little bit wild, which you couldn't get away with in a lot of movies. So I'm looking forward to that. And then straight after that, I have an IMAX project, a nature project coming up, which I also really love because you have to write a lot of music for nature, for natural history, and it's really a lot of storytelling. The music has to do lots of heavy lifting with storytelling, which I love, and I've done little bit of that. I did a wonderful film with Apple TV called Elephant Queen, which is if you haven't seen it, is the most amazing, is like the most amazing film about elephants you're ever going to see. It's phenomenal, and I got to go out to Kenya to meet the elephants and spend some time with them in the wild, which was amazing. So yeah, lots more variety coming, which is I guess is me. I'm always just moving on to the next thing and looking for new experiences. That's me all over.
Yeah, well, that variety is the spice of life, and then you've
Right.
got got a lot of spices in your kitchen. I love it. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing such great music with us, and look forward to much more, and look forward to talking to you again very, very soon.
Wonderful. Enjoyed it. Great conversation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Alex. Okay,
Thank you.
bye.